I'm so excited to chat with Jean Atman on the Awaken Feminine podcast. Jean is a quantum healer, ascension coach, author, and speaker who specializes in healing trauma and burnout and helps mission driven women build the confidence they need to go after their dreams and live the life they envision for themselves. Her primary focus is on empowering them to heal past pain and create internal stability and well being so they can enjoy an ease filled and joyful life. And I know she has so much love and wisdom to share with us today. She's joining me from South Carolina in the USA. Welcome to the show, Jean.
Thank you so much. I am so excited to be here with you today.
Yes, so am I. I can't wait for jumping into our conversation. But before we do, I always love to ask my guests this question. So I'm going to start off with this question. And it's, what is your definition of an awakened feminine?
Yeah, awakened feminine to me is someone who's really in their creative flow, someone who's embodying the divine feminine as opposed to the distorted feminine. The divine feminine is being able to receive and give effortlessly without overgiving, one that can create and manifest her reality without feeling the pressure of needing to meet other people's expectations, a person who knows what she needs and isn't afraid to go for it and ask for it. So I feel like that is sort of my definition of an awakened feminine.
That's a beautiful, juicy definition. Thank you for sharing that with us. Yeah. So, Jean, I would really love for you to, I gave a brief introduction of you and what you do, but I really love to kind of explore why is it that you've gone into this space of helping people healing trauma and burnout. Like, what's this, backstory that's led you to where you are now?
Yeah, it's definitely from my own personal journey and experience has really allowed me to understand the process at a depth that I've been able to work through myself. And whenever I get a cool insight or epiphany or something amazing that happens that can lead more efficiency to life or make life easier, I always want to share it. And so, especially with things like this that are so, can be so deeply embodied and so consuming of someone's experience, it's not comfortable to be there. And walking through that process myself really kind of put a fire under my butt to help other people through it. And I've always been, ever since I was a child, a really helpful person. I love to help people thrive. I love to see the best in them and help them see that in themselves. I love to help them step into their potential and recognize even what that is. And now it's literally like working through all the layers of what could be an obstacle to stepping into that potential. So it's probably the most satisfying thing besides being a mom that I could possibly do in my life. So it's like a no-brainer.
Yeah. You're a mama. I'm a mama too. So yeah. How many kids do you have?
I have 3 girls.
Oh, nice. I've got 2 girls.
Aw, yeah. So sweet.
Yeah. I love girls. I can't imagine having boys. I was just having that discussion with some parents today. But anyway. So Jean, I want to ask you, so you said that this is coming, what you do is really coming from what's happened in your life. Can you share with us, like, what led to your burnout? What was that experience like, just to share so that our audience can get a feel of what happened when you had a burnout? Yeah.
Sure. And also I do want to state too, that I want to offer a framework for your audience too, so that they can not only understand my story, but be able to access how they can get into their own too. So I'll talk with you a little bit more about that later. But when I grew up in a really toxic household with a lot of cruelty and abuse and no protection from it. And so I grew up feeling like the world is a cruel place. The people that are supposed to protect me are my abusers. I have no one to rely on except myself. I need to really learn to read the room in order to survive through this. And so when you have a childhood like that, you grow into life with certain belief systems that say, I have to make sure that everyone around me is happy, or else it's not a good situation for me. So I developed people pleasing, behaviors, overgiving behaviors, trying to meet other people's expectations when they can't even understand what they actually need, just an excess of energy outpouring just so I can stay safe. And so within my relationships in adulthood, I was also still overgiving, merging with people that had a deep well of need that could never be met, no matter how many thousands of lifetimes we would try, and just feeling exhausted all the time because I was always trying to pacify someone else because they could not do it for themselves. And because I grew up with that, that's all I knew that existed here in this realm. I finally got to a point where I was in a really deeply toxic narcissistic relationship. And I was just becoming a shell of a person. I was losing myself and I couldn't take it one moment longer. And some good friends of mine, they said, we love you so much, but we just can't witness what's happening to you. And we have to take a couple steps back because we just can't watch this happen to you anymore. And what that did for me was it offered me so much insight that, number one, I wasn't crazy. This actually was happening, and that it wasn't okay. And for the first time, I realized I don't have to live this way. Life doesn't have to be this way. It's not supposed to be this way. There's something wrong here. And so what that did is it led me into a deep dive into my stuff. Like, why was I allowing this person, this complete taker, because I was an overgiver. So of course he was an overtaker. We balanced. Why was I calling this into my experience? What was within me that was saying this was okay? And what can I do about it? Because it was not comfortable there. And so I finally learned how to break free of toxic relationships and the impact of what those were having on my life. But I didn't quite understand how to actually show up for myself yet, to be there for myself, to receive things. And so because those people pleasing and those overgiving and overachieving patterns were still existent, I then caused myself into a huge down spiral of burnout. I was completely depleted. I had literally lost my vision because my energy was so low that I couldn't even see. I couldn't have any movement around me. It was overwhelming to my system. And I learned that my nervous system throughout my whole life was so jacked up from being in survival mode and suffering through so much abuse that until I managed my nervous system and the trauma, I couldn't learn to thrive in my life. So what this complete deep burnout and chronic fatigue taught me was, number one, I don't know how to rest unless I'm sick. So I had to learn how to rest even when I started feeling better. I learned how to receive. I had to ask my girls to make food for me because I could not physically pull myself off of the couch. And so I needed to not only surrender that I need to take care of everybody that's around me, but that I can actually be cared for by them. So all of these big, deeply ingrained programs were being challenged through this experience. And when I finally learned that my energy body was holding so much trauma, and that was creating such a heaviness and an exhaustion in my field, I started to learn how to decongest that stuff at the level that it impacted me in the first place. And as we know, trauma isn't necessarily the experience of what happened to us, but it's how we internalize it, right? So I really started to take a deeper dive into my own harm of self, my own harsh inner critic voice, my own stuff, and how I was continuing to perpetuate those patterns within, even though I wasn't accepting them outside of myself. So it was a huge journey through this process. And on the other side of it is amazing when we can get into our stuff and learn what the actual obstacle is and how to move it. Then we can live a life of freedom and amazing relationships and loving, supportive people around us and proper rest and fun and joy and all these things that we want. We just don't know how to access it because we've got so much in the way of it.
Wow, what a journey for you. And, I'm so happy and glad that you're on the other side. Otherwise, we won't be talking. But, just listening to you talk about, people pleasing and overgiving And finding out, because I think if you're a coach, most of the time you're quite, you're an empath. So you kind of know what other people need, even though they might not need it. Like that, that kind of energy that you're talking about. I'm like, that is me. And I know so many people around me that, because we are brought up to please our parents and please, even if we weren't brought up in a toxic environment, it's just innate. I see that in my kids, they want to please me, but I don't teach them to do it. It's just something that happens. But then how do we, change that narrative so that they don't then grow up being people pleasers? So I just love that, you deep dived into there. So can you share with us, like, how long it took you to recover from the burnout? I mean, you couldn't see, that's pretty major. And what were the tools, or what were the things that were the most helpful in your healing process?
Yeah, really tuning into what I needed for the first time, because we think that we know what self-care looks like.
Yeah.
But until you're kind of in that situation where you really have to know what you need, we can tend to get in the busyness and ignore it. So what really helped me to heal is to understand what my need actually was. And the programs that I was working against, the old programs. So for instance, when I started to feel better, I was so excited to jump right back into work, to do all these things with my kids, to get back into life, and I would relapse. And it would frustrate me so much. And I finally went into meditation. I was like, what? And like I said earlier, you're not practicing resting. As soon as you feel better, you jump right back into that overachieving. And so until you learn to properly rest, even when you have the energy, if you feel like resting, then rest. You don't have to be taken out of the game to give yourself that permission. So literally it was just like playing with the energy and playing with the experience. And I think people's greatest gift is the gift of curiosity. And so when you can be curious about what is going on here, it's not like, oh, poor me, this is happening to me. Why me? I can't, blah, blah. It's like when you down spiral like that into yourself, it's not going to help you heal. But if you can approach it like, why is this going, what's going on? Why is this happening? What do I need to see? Then you start to see that stuff that's been hidden, that's been in your way, because all of these experiences, it's kind of like what we believe we will always find validation for. Right. Yeah. So people take experiences as validation for, there it is again. See, this is happening again. And I say, don't look for the validation, look for the information. This is trying to encourage you to unearth something so that you can see it, so you can learn to get out of your own way. So for me, it was testing the waters. Can I push myself here? No, that's going to cause a relapse. Okay. So that was too much activity, too much something. And now I know if I start to internalize stress, my body instantly tells me like, that's not a place where you want to go. So it's a reminder. So when those little signs come up and those triggers come up, it's a reminder, you don't have to stress. Can you reroute? Can you re-regulate? So then I practice re-regulating and not feeling into the stress of an experience that I'm going through. So it's sort of like subtle changes that we can make, but the majority of the work is really a mindfulness and a curiosity to understand what's happening inside. And when you have that understanding of what you need, you can actually meet your need.
Yes, so that makes sense.
Yeah, it's quite simple when you think about it, but it took about 2 years. And one of the biggest things that really helped me to heal was when I recognized how deeply the trauma was setting in my body and in my system. And I would think, you had mentioned being empathic, and as empaths, we read the room like nobody's business. And a lot of it comes out of necessity when we're young. And so for me, I thought my gifts stemmed from my trauma. I learned to be this way because I had to. And what I learned was, we come in with these gifts. The experiences that we have don't build the gifts. They might give you additional information about how to use them, but the gifts are there without needing to hold the trauma. So when I learned that, I was able to fully come into those gifts without having that buffer of, I need to hold this trauma because that's what these bloomed from, basically. So giving myself permission just to be gifted, be empathic, be psychic, be intuitive, be all these things without necessarily holding the trauma that was really weighing me down and continuing to create that burnout.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for that. Such great information and, experience of your journey and how you got out of it. A couple of questions came up. The first one is, when you're talking about, sometimes we go, why me? Why is this happening to me? Right. And did you have that thought when you were, when you first started?
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
sure.
And the next question coming from that one is, there are some people that will stay in that why me and just keep going down that spiral. What was the thing that made you go, Jean, you need to step out of this shit. You need to sort yourself out?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really easy. And there's two different ways you can kind of step into that victim role. You can be the victim, which keeps you kind of marinating and looping in those old programs. And these are just habitual programs. There's nothing wrong with you if you're doing that. There's nothing that is broken if you find yourself in that space. It really is this habitual program that's been looping through your subconscious that has quite momentum behind it. And so to break that, you really do need to understand the process of how to get yourself out of that. And if you don't, it's really easy to stay in that place, but because I've walked through a lot of different processes in my life, I saw this for what it was. And I recognized I was victimized. Absolutely. I was victimized. And when I recognized the depth of that hurt, I was able to dive into healing at that depth. Because if we ignore that we were even hurt in the first place, and I did that for years, that was another thing that created the burnout, was I just get up and keep moving. You brush yourself off, you keep going because you have to. And I kept ignoring the hurt. And when I finally sunk into it and just let myself sink to the deepest place within it, I was like, oh man, there's a lot of hurt here. How can I love myself through this? How can I be gentle with myself, knowing that sucked to go through that? What do I need now to start the healing process? How can I show up for myself to really get through this stuff in a way that is going to be permanent? I'm working with a client right now who has a lot of rejection and abandonment wounds. And she reached out today because she says, this is coming up again. Like, why am I still here? And I said, it's that really intense breakthrough place where you feel like you just can't move forward one more thing. You're literally at that ceiling, just ready to break through it, because all of the programs and the patterns are holding on so tightly because they want to keep you in that place of familiarity. And you're trying to pivot in a new direction. It's intense. And that's what stops a lot of people from moving forward, is that intensity. But as I said to her this morning, this is temporary, and I'm going to show you the tools to get through it so you never have to experience this again. And I compared it to transition. As a mom, when you're in transition in labor, it is not a comfortable place to be. It is intense. You can't do anything with it yet. You can't push yet. You just have to be with the intensity of the pain until you're 10 centimeters dilated. You can actually take some action. This is the process of process. When you're in that transition, it's not comfortable, but you know that this is kind of like a death rebirth process. And once you kind of let the pieces of self be laid to rest that you no longer need, let those die off. All of a sudden you make space for something so much brighter and so much better, but you cannot have anything new coming in if all of that space is still consumed with the stuff that's not working. So allow yourself this temporary discomfort to alleviate ultimate chronic suffering, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Such wise words. Like it's It's like the pulling off the Band-Aid, do it quickly so that you're not suffering the long term. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I wanted to ask you, you were saying that, you saw it for what it, saw your victimization as what it was because you have that self-awareness. Were you always someone that was self-aware? Like, when you were going through your burnout, did you already have tools in your toolkit and you weren't starting from scratch? How was that process for you? Because I know a lot of times when I talk to people and they go through burnout, that is when like all their spiritual awakening, their personal development stuff comes on, starts. Was that you as well? Or were you doing the work before then?
Yeah, I was absolutely doing the work before then. And I feel like my whole life has been this unfoldment of really purging through the deep layers and re-regulating the whole system. The depth of the work really started when I broke free of that narcissistic relationship, when I really took a deep dive in with intention to see what's going on in there. So I had already started to really process through. But as you said, within that new burnout experience, there's a whole other bag full of lessons that were just desperately waiting for me to learn and to play with. So with each experience that we have, there's more that we can extract. There's more wisdom, there's more strength, there's more calm we can gain within each of those air quotes setbacks. And I find that when we are being stunted from our forward movement, it's because we're supposed to take some time to see something, because the journey forward will be a lot easier if we take the time now to be in the pause, be in the stillness, be more quiet and introspective and see what's happening within. And once we remedy that and recalibrate into our true north, then we can move effortlessly forward. So I always encourage people, if you're finding a lot of roadblocks in your way of your forward movement, maybe it's time to stop moving forward and just sit for a minute.
Yeah.
See what wants to get your attention. Allow that attention and then see what happens after that.
Yes, for sure. Being there, done that. I think most people have. And it reminds me of something I think Gabrielle Bernstein says, like obstacles are, I can't remember the exact quote, but like they're like your guide to a new direction. Like, don't take it as like, oh, why isn't it working? But take it as a blessing, as a gift, because it's trying to lead you down the right path. I wanted to ask you, I lost my train of thought, which I do quite often because I'm like intently listening to you. But let's go back to the pause whilst we were talking about the pause and resting, because you were like, oh, once I'm better, I just go back and I just go back. And hello, I used to do that a lot. Now I know because I've had so many kicks up the butts from the universe that I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll just stop, right? So can you talk a bit more about like what, having worked with so many clients, what are the things that make your clients or people do that? Like, why is it that we just have to keep going back and like working hard and like not letting ourselves rest? And then we like get hit, and get sick, and then we have to rest, and then we just go back. What are the common things that make us do that?
Mm-hmm. So typically speaking, the overachieving, overgiving, people-pleasing behaviors that are that create burnout, people try to apply those same behaviors. So if you are an overachiever and you're overdoing and you're overgiving and you're just depleting energy, and then you fall into burnout, those same behaviors that brought you there. So you might desperately research everything you can find in how to heal. You might take all of your energy and focus on how to heal. Yeah. You might you might, right?
Yes.
Now it's coming in.
Sounds familiar.
So this is what we do. Right. Believe me, when I realized this, I was like, oh my gosh. And so we do that because that's who we are, who we think we are. And so we're going to apply that same way of beingness to any experience that we're having. So when you can see then being an honest evaluation of yourself and go, okay, yes, I'm still doing that in this process of healing, that you can say, okay, so how can I start to respond differently? How can I really get in touch with what I actually need and start to drop off the limbs of needing? Can I be okay with being, with sitting, trying to make pacified without doing how are you approaching your process of healing? Because if you don't shift, you're just, you're snowballing. You're continuing to perpetuate the same patterns. And so, we're taken out of the game. You're just like, go sit on the bench. You got to take some time out. It gives us a chance to reflect and to see, kind of what's going on. And I know for me personally, if I start going in the wrong direction, I get hit hard. Like they're like, nope, you're not going in that way. And usually it was with some sort of physical, like my back will be out or something. And they're like, okay, now just lay there and think about what you did. And then when you can, see which way you're supposed to go, then you can get back, and I know this happens time and time again. I'm like, oh, I wasn't listening. So if we really want to heal, what we can do is to learn to listen to ourselves. And it's the subtleties of self, right? Because we're so used to meeting other people's expectations, the busyness of the to-do list, the cars lining the lunches, like all these other people's needs have come before ours pretty much 100% of the time. And so to reflect back and say, what do I need? A lot of us are like, we don't have time for that. We have to do, but carve out some time. And especially if you're in count out or you're verging on burnout, now is the time before you have to go head first into that experience, because it is not comfortable to be there. Actively learning, you don't need the tough experiences. If you're actively listening, you don't need the tough experiences. So what does that look like in action? It's literally committing, let's say, half an hour to go for a walk by yourself at night. No phone, no other people, just be with your, or have a cup of coffee or tea in the morning and just take in the day before the busyness starts. Or what kind of self-care practices you can incorporate into your life so that the busyness does not overtake you and down spiral you into a place that's not comfortable. We can be intentional with our work. We don't have to be at the mercy of the universe saying, okay, you're not listening, we're going to have to get loud. Because we really, are encouraging you to move in this way, and we can do it nicely or do it a little bit more harshly. It's your choice, really. Choose one, pick one. I encourage you to pick the easier route. It's a lot more graceful.
Definitely is. Yeah. And I just love that, whenever I speak to people and they have the, universe whacked me across the head experience, I always have a giggle because I'm always like the same. It's like, they just got whacked on their head, just got a whack on the head. It's like, stop it.
Right.
Stop.
I know. And I love too that you're laughing about it. I think that's the best thing we can do, is just to have a sense of humor about it, because we're like, oh, there our humanness is coming out again. This overachieving human is working its program again.
Yes. And I think a sense of humor is so needed, especially, when you are continuously, awakening and uncovering layers of yourself, because if you don't have a good sense of humor, you will go down that downward spiral, and, it takes time to come back out, but if you have a sense of humor, I find it's like, oh, yeah, all right, got it. I'll listen and we'll move on. And not saying that is not hard. It's always challenging and hard and all those things, but it makes it a lot easier, I think, when you have a sense of humor and can laugh about it.
Yes, for sure. And I do think, as I was talking earlier about that client too, and when we have those intense moments that come in, and keeping in mind that those are the breakthrough moments, those are what's getting you moving into the next part, so that everything is going to kind of ebb and flow in life. And a long time ago, a mentor of mine said, she said, your vibration is all over the place. And I was like, what does that mean? Like, what are you talking about, before I knew anything? And what I found is I was in a really deep down spiral one time. And I was in that phase of, why am I here again? Why am I still here? Why can't I ever? Why does this happen for everybody else, not for me? All the whys, right? And I went into a meditation again. And what I got was, well, you created this 3 weeks ago, this down spiral. And I was like, how did that happen? And they said, when you were down spiraling before, why me, pity me, that creates a momentum, a wave that sets you up for a future experience. So what we feel in the present is creating our future, right? So I thought, I'm not doing that anymore. I don't want to do that anymore. And of course, another wave had been created from the current one. But when I got into that one, I thought, nope, I'm not going there. I'm not going to continue to perpetuate this, knowing that I don't have to, So instead of following all the pity me and the down thoughts in, I was able to pull myself up out of that. And instead of a huge roller coaster of waves, you just start a gentle climb instead. And then you just elevate and elevate and elevate. And every experience you have, you will have little dips, but how you manage the dips are really going to how your future looks. So if you can keep yourself out of the down spiral and say, this is just temporary, this is comfortable, I don't really like it here, but I know it's productive. And so I know that I'm going to be okay. We're getting through some big stuff, and you can still be positive, even though you're in it.
Yes.
Yeah. So then you're like, okay, this is like moving some big stuff and I don't like it, but I know it's necessary to get to that next place of freedom from it. And then on the other side of that is the freedom that
Yeah, such gold in what you was just with such wisdom in just what you said just now, for our listeners to take note, to just realize that when we're in that downward spiral, and it can, set off the next thing that happens. So it's just so important to manage our, how we act and how we react to what's happening for us. Yeah. I wanted to ask you, because you were talking about vibration and energy, and I know you're a quantum healer, Ascension Coach. So, you do work in that. Was this something that, were you someone that's always been tapped into energy, or like, is this something that you've learned because of, your journey?
Both. It definitely has grown and expanded through my journey. But ever since I was a little girl, I would be visited by earthbounds and outer worldly beings. And there were, beings that would sit on the foot of my bed and put their hand on my calf, and there was no one there. So it used to really freak me out because it felt like it should be comforting, but I couldn't see who it was. So that was scary. And I would smell things in my room, and different like eras almost of time would come into these smells that I would smell from different earthbounds that were coming in. And so it was always this sort of used to scare me when I was a kid. And I used to run around my house saying, I don't care if you're here, I just don't want to see you. I don't care if you're here, I just don't want to see you, because I didn't want to rattle anything and have them lash out. I didn't know how that realm worked when I was little. So it's always been something very fascinating to me, because I've always had access to beyond the veil. And then when I was in a deep meditation years ago, I was working through a really deep chakra cleanse of myself. And I got to my throat. And when you're in deep meditation, your body just sort of unwinds and it sort of moves on its own. And it's just kind of going with the flow. Well, my head started to kind of, do a little bit of like unwinding, and I got stuck with my throat open. And it was just like this deep clearing of my throat and all the lies and illusions and everything else that were kind of in that shadow part of that chakra. And I couldn't pick my head up, and it kind of freaked me out. And so I invoked Archangel Michael to come in and pull me from the depth of my meditation. And all of a sudden I felt this huge presence on my right, and his hand kind of gently pushed my head over to his shoulder. And I sat there, I was like, okay, I have officially lost my mind. Like, and I had this dialogue with myself. I was like, well, you did call him, but is it like, but he's here. And well, you did call him, and I was just had this interesting dialogue with myself. And I finally thought, okay, I'm just going to sit with this and see how it feels. Like I called him, he showed up. Now you're scared about it. So I just finally got settled into this process. Like he's here. I called on his assistants and he showed up, and this is how he showed up for me. And he wasn't a dialogue, or he was more presence for me. He still is. And then when I picked my head up, I found this feminine presence on my left, and she identified herself as Saint Bridget. And I didn't know who that was at the time, but I started asking her all kinds of questions. And this is when I was going through my divorce and all these things. And she was just giving me these truth bombs, and I could feel the resonance of what she was saying to me. And I thought, oh, I have access to all this wisdom and information at any time. Like, what have I been doing? Why haven't I been accessing this? And I didn't remember a lot of the conversation because I was still so expanded. So when I came back embodied, I was like, what was that? But I did remember one of the last things she said to me was, you've been restless your whole life because you've been searching for your connection back to us. And I was like, oh, because I'd had so much abuse and trauma. And I just thought the world was just a dark, cold, cruel place. She's like, we've always been here. Like you've been searching. And this is what you've been searching for. The connection to all that is, to the outerworldly beings who have always been here supporting you, who helped you to buffer you so that you could survive through what you've lived through. Like we've always been here. And to me, that was just such the most beautiful moment and heartfelt experience. And then for the next several years, I was just exploring all kinds of different ascended masters that I could possibly connect with to learn more about the support system that we all have here in this plane. So it continues to grow and evolve in different ways as I do,
Yeah. I love that. Full body goosebumps going on. But yeah, I love hearing people's like woo stories, just because because it took me a while to accept my connection because culturally, family, upbringing as well. It was, and science background. I used to be a pharmacist. So, it took a lot of time for me to come out of the closet in that way. So yes, I just love listening to what you just talked about. That was really cool. I want to ask you, this question has popped in a couple of times. So I think I need to ask you, has, your journey and your changes from, healing through your burnout changed the way you interact and parent and teach your girls?
Yeah, absolutely. A big piece that I have come into awareness of is when we have our own internal wounding and those wounds are still open and raw, we will act from those wounds. So because I wasn't protected when I was young, I was overly protective of my girls. I mean, it was crazy how obsessed I was about every single thing they ate, how everything they interacted with, the toys they play with, if they were natural, if they were painted with something they weren't supposed, like everything, so hyper aware because I was acting from that wound. So the more I have healed my own internal wounding, I am less obsessed with how I show up for my girls. I allow them a lot more space to find their own way, to play with things, knowing that they're okay, because I'm still holding a large amount of space for them, but I'm not on them. I'm not in it with them. So it's really helped to balance my relationship with them and to also trust them in their own experience, that they're not walking through the same thing that I walked through. They don't need that level of protection that I once needed. They're safe. They've got a fierce mama bear that is like, whew, I am there if they need me. But if they don't, I'm okay being hands off now, where that took some balancing within in order for me to find that balance within that relationships or those relationships as well.
That's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And because I just want to highlight how important it is when it comes to our relationship with our kids and the healing and the things we do, because it really does make a difference with your relationship and in turn how they, see the world and, so that they don't have to do as much healing as we do.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, my girls are really gifted too. And so I was teaching them energetic techniques since they were little. And one of my girls, she was, I don't know, maybe first grade. And we would do chakra clears at night, and that would help her to ease into her sleep, and her energy was aligned and she felt good. And she came home from the playground. She says, Mom, she said, I was trying to do chakra clears with people today and they don't even know what a chakra is. And I was like, maybe we just keep that like for now, just between ourselves. She's like, I don't get it. Like, they don't even know what the chakra is.
Love it.
So I taught them how to really embody their gifts from the beginning, because they are very, very gifted. So to be able to have somebody to help teach them and show them how to embody those things and celebrate them was a big part of my piece for them, I think, in their lives.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. Having you as as a mama, as a teacher, to show them, it's okay to embrace that side of them, because it's still, considered woo and, all those things. So I just love that you're able to be there and do that for them. That's beautiful. Yeah. I'm just looking at the time, and I know you've got an appointment after, so I'm going to just ask you a couple more questions before we wrap up. So the first one really is, if you went back to a younger version of Jean, what's that one most important piece of advice that you would give her?
I would say to remember that she's loved.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
And lastly, what is setting your soul on fire at the moment?
I think coming into this place, this new earth energy that we're in, is so exciting and fun to play with. So I think exploring this new for me is so much fun. Because I spent a lot of time in the old paradigm and learning how to work within those systems. And systems are very different now. And blueprint, really, we're literally, as we go, led through inspired action about how to behave here. And so I love novelty. I love change. I love exploring new places. And so to have this whole planetary energy be at our fingertips now, that it's like, cultivate here, I am so lit up by that potential and helping other people access that.
Yeah, that is amazing. The work that you do is so important. And, I just loved everything that you shared with us today. Thank you. Thank you so much for your time and your love and wisdom. So, Jean, I want to ask you, if people want to find out more about you, how they can work with you, or if there's anything else that you want to add, that might help our audience, where should they go?
Yeah, the easiest place to find me would be on my website at 𝐸𝐴Tman.com. And also, I will send you a little gift for your audience. I'll include my 5-day resistance cleanse for people. It really helps to identify how you might be getting in your own way, what sorts of things you might be carrying from your backstory that are not serving you now or creating obstacles in your life. How to identify those programs and systems that just aren't really yours or align with where you're going. So 5 days of a guided healing transmission each day. There's a journal to kind of help into the depth of, asking those probing questions to help encourage you to go in there, and lessons daily every day. So I would love to share that with your people and help them just sort of ease gracefully into, learning a little bit deeper about themselves and be a slightly different way that they've done before.
Well, thank you so much for that. I'm sure our audience will, would love that. So thank you so much for that beautiful gift. I will have all your details in the show notes so people can reach out to you and find you. Thank you once again for this beautiful conversation.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I appreciated our time together.